All right, guys, back for another episode today of What in the World. Starting off 2024 with a bang. I want to make a quick announcement. Our newest sponsor is the Deck, local restaurant, fast food restaurant in Columbia, Mississippi, 1111 Highway 13 North. Their food is so good, it's RE-DECKULOUS. Folks, I didn't write it, I just read it. All right, guys, let's get into the show today. Today, we're going to talk about something that, especially around the holidays and around like Valentine's Day, it always tends to be an issue, and that is the issue of relationships. Good ones, bad ones, some in the middle. We're going to be talking to an expert today, a guy named Rick Soetebier. I met him about 2.5 years ago. He was on one of the other shows that I did back a couple of years ago. Just a wealth of knowledge when it comes to relationships, and we're going to pick his brain today, and we'll just see how it turns out. So let's bring him on the show.
Hey, William.
Rick, how you doing today, brother?
Doing well.
Look, now, I billed you as an expert in relationships. Don't let me down now.
Well, I'll see what I can do for you.
First of all, before we jump into some Q&A, which you were excited when you heard that we got some users that have some questions for you. But before we jump into the Q&A, for those that have no idea who Rick Soetebier is, who never got a chance to see our original conversation a couple years ago, kind of give everybody the snapshot version of who Rick Soetebier is and how you do what you do now. And
sure, yeah, I was. I've been a student of self and relationship improvement for 35 years, and prior to this, I was a financial advisor, and I studied all the financial advisor stuff and learned that information. But I've always had a passion for relationship and self-improvement information because I was working on myself. And probably about 15 years ago or so, I started to recognize that everything that I was learning about me applies to everybody else. And I started to recognize people just out of the blue, didn't know them from Adam, would start walking up to me and start sharing relationship problems and have questions. And the simplest explanation I can have for that is it was a God thing, pointing me in that direction. Well, when I retired about a little over 10 years ago, about 11 years ago now, almost 12 years ago, I co-authored a book, or I started writing a book with a co-author, and about 2 or 3 months into the writing, I recognized, and I was still working as a financial advisor at the time. I've got to step back. I recognized that this is what I want to do when I grow up. And, I want to coach people. I want to help people because I had gone through a divorce myself and recognized all the mistakes that I had made. There were, my ex and I had problems, and it was, it's always easy to point the finger. Well, it's her fault. It's her fault. But I recognized I made a lot of mistakes too. And so I started writing down these mistakes and the problems that I had. And one of the grand, I guess, observations, or one of the epiphanies I had, is that while some great things came out of my marriage, I've got a wonderful daughter, but there are problems in the marriage that I could have avoided had I been wide awake and pulled off the blinders of infatuation. And so that's where all this stuff started culminating. And we co-authored the book that came out about 10 years ago. And, I've been working in this field ever since. I've been coaching for the last 10 years, and it's been a lot of fun. It's been a growing experience, and just all the different people that I get to talk to, and the different problems I get to hear. So I'm excited for the questions because it may open my eyes to some new problems.
Well, I got a quick question for you before we get started. You said you wrote a book 10 years or about a decade ago. Did you not? Yes. Was it just not a passion to continue like a series of books?
I started actually writing a second book because and it was based more on the questions or the comments that I would get from women at the time, and it started to. Let me take a step back. Women were complaining about sex and about men and how it was all about their personal interests and not theirs, and it became almost a porn novel on taking care of your partner, and I just said that's not the way I want to go. so so I just
in the
stopped
adult
writing.
industry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's not,
You'd open up a whole different demographic there.
That's a whole different demographic, and that's not the path I want to go down. So I put that away, and I thought I was putting it away for a while, but in the meantime I ended up I've continued to write. I've continued to do blogs up until about a year ago, and about a year and a half ago, I started working on an online course, and that's recently completed and launched. And so that's where more of my focus has gone. So is
We'll hit
creating.
that at the very end of the episode, so they'll know how to get it and all that kind of stuff. And of
Absolutely.
course, he didn't ask me to pitch it for him, so I can't give you a discount percentage off of it because he didn't.
Well, we'll
That's
give
okay,
you.
We'll do that later.
We'll give you. I'll give you the same launch discount. So I'll tease your audience. We'll give a 50% discount. So.
Whoa! Watch out now. Turn around giving that stuff away. Hey, you need to give away relationship advice because relationships are screwed up. A lot of people in this world, their relationships are screwed up. All right, you said something that triggered a actual question I had and a question that one of our listeners had, one of our viewers had. Why do you feel? Oh no, I'm sorry. I said, why do you feel this? It looks like a young lady, Karen. No, not Karen. Kyron. That could be a guy. I don't know. Wants to know, why do you feel that money is the number one reason for relationship failures?
I used to think that money is.
Or do you feel that? You might not feel that. I'm just saying I think he feels or she feels that.
Yeah, and I understand, and and this goes back to the premise of why I do what I do. Money. Typically in a relationship, you're going to have people that have different perspectives on how to handle money. And typically one is going to be a spender and one is going to be a saver. And when those two come together, it can, if you don't work that stuff out early in the beginning, it's going to be a nightmare, and here's the problem. Is that in the first couple of years of a relationship, we're overcome with the raging hormones of infatuation. And infatuation is all about the raging hormones. It's the oxytocin, it's the serotonin, it's the dopamine. And sometimes it takes up to a couple of years for that stuff to settle down and for us to start waking up and seeing what's going on. Why? A lot of times we wake up and said, "Oh my God, what have I done?" And so that's where the main problem comes in, and that's the premise that I keep turning back to, is that it may not necessarily be the money, it's the ignoring of these differences up front and not being crystal clear about the things we want in a relationship long down the road. When I wrote my book, it was it was written because there was no good information on how to choose a good partner, and I still contend there's not a lot of good information out there on choosing the right partner up front. There's lots of stuff on the shelf about how to fix a broken marriage or a broken relationship, but there's not a lot out there, and so that's really what I focus on is doing the grunt work or the due diligence up front. And I contend that if you do that due diligence up front, you won't have a lot of hard work. Don't misunderstand me. There is work to be done on any relationship. It takes effort for any relationship, but the best relationships, it just feels easy because you're on the same page about virtually everything. You can have conversations about anything and everything. So, that's when it comes to finances. Those are conversations you need to have long before you're in a marriage, so that you understand: is your partner coming in with a lot of debt? Is your partner a spender or a saver? And do they match your money management habits or patterns? So that's why I'm so focused on figuring out what's going on ahead of time. Now, that being said, if you are having problems with your partner, Dave Ramsey's course on money management is a great course because it addresses those very things, the differences between partners. So I don't know if that helps you, but
All right, so that was a very good answer. Very good answer. And it kind of say it's almost like we practice this because this segues right into the next question. It's like we rehearse this. But you were talking about spenders and savers.
yes.
Rachel from our Facebook group asked, "Does it give your relationship a better chance if you and your mate are opposites, or more alike?" I'm assuming she's talking about, like you were talking about, spenders and savers.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I get that one often. There's the saying that opposites attract, and they do.
Mhm.
And I've read studies that have shown that when you get into a relationship, and somebody is the opposite of you, you think, oh, isn't that cool? Isn't she cute? Isn't he? Look at all the stuff he does for me, or look at isn't it, and it goes back to the infatuation. And statistically speaking, opposites will attract, but they'll come apart. Those relationships typically come apart after an average of 5 years, because the little things you thought were cute up front end up driving you nuts later on. And so what I've found from my coaching experience, my personal experience, is the more things you have in common, the stronger the bond is going to be between the two of you. When you have common morals, common values, common interests, common goals, it's and now not everything is going to be identical. You're going to have, one of my most prized relationships was somebody that was into pageantry, in specifically the Miss America pageants at the local level. And I laughed when she told me. I says, "You're on your own. That's girly stuff." But because of our relationship and our connection, I started to pay attention to what was going on. And she would explain all the stuff that goes on. The stuff that we see on TV, with the Miss America pageant, it goes so much deeper than that. You get the onstage question, that accounts for about 5% of the total score that the young lady receives. So I mean, their poise, etiquette, intelligence. There's a panel of judges that's behind the scene asking them serious questions. And so my point here is that you can become passionate about your partner's hobbies or your partner's passions, and you don't have to participate in those, but you become more than a critic, more than a behind the scenes kind of person. You actually start to encourage them and be a part of their a part of their passion, a part of their hobby, because it's their hobby. And because when you're in the right relationship, your connection will be so deep, so strong, that you're naturally going to gravitate to what they do, and they will do the same for you. If you've got a passion or a hobby, they'll gravitate to you. But that's only if it's in an extraordinary relationship. And that's what I encourage everybody to search for, is that extraordinary relationship, not just a ho-hum or a so-so relationship. It's got to be extraordinary. And that's why I want everybody to walk away from this, if you're single, that you do the hard work up front, so that you don't have all of the hard work to do on the back end. So
Another fantastic game. I mean, you're gonna make these people believe you are an expert at this. All right, so this next one has got to be your PR department. Gigi, from the thousands of couples that you have counseled with, have you ever told a couple that they are not a good fit and they should distance themselves immediately?
Yeah, and I want to step back, that I generally don't work with, and I do not work with married couples. I will work. Okay. I generally work with one or the other in a non-marriage relationship. That being said, yeah,
couples. I don't know if it's talking about like pre-wedding or.
Well, yeah, and I just wanted to clarify that, because.
Let's say I just wanted to pre-marriage.
Yeah, I wanted to clarify that I am pre-marriage, because I've gone through the divorce, and I think that if you are married, you need to do everything that you can to make that relationship work. And part of the reason I do what I do is because I've gone through a divorce, and my deepest hope is that if I can reach one person today, and have them make a better relationship decision and avoid a divorce, that's a successful conversation. That's a win for me. But back to the question in specific, yes, I have counseled people, or I have coached. I don't want to say counsel. I have coached people.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Change that.
Nope, that's all right. Because I don't want anybody to walk away.
Your PR later, she got that right. So.
Yeah, I don't want anybody walking away from this conversation and saying, "Oh, he's a therapist or a counselor." No, I'm a coach. I don't hang that shingle out. I deal at a much higher level, and if you really have problems, and the people that I'm coaching can be in relationships or can be in budding relationships, and if it's not a healthy fit right from the beginning, I will tell them. Or if they've been in it, you may be in a relationship, a long-term relationship, 3, 4, 5 years. I'll tell you to walk away, because if it's not the relationship that you're comfortable with now, I guarantee you 5 years down the road, 10, 20 years, it's not going to be any better. And part of the reason that we get into these relationships is because we see a handful of good qualities here, and this is for both men and women. We visualize. I don't want to say fantasize, but that's as close as I can come. We fantasize that this person can be our soulmate. That we see so many good qualities in there. But on the other hand, there's this pile of crap. There's these problems. There's these issues. Whether it could be smoking, it could be anger issues, it could be codependency, it could be narcissism, it could be any number of things over in this pile. But because we see the good things over here, we tend to attach ourselves to these good qualities, and we don't want to give up these good qualities. And a lot of times it's because we say, well, I might not find anybody better. I guarantee you will find someone better. You'll find somebody that fits like a glove. It's not easy to find that, but because we have to take time and put in effort to do that. But if I see that a relationship isn't healthy now, it doesn't mean that either one of them are a bad person. It just means it's not a good fit. And it's so much better to have this conversation early on than it is to wait for a year, 2 years, 5 years into it, and then say, yeah, this just isn't working for me, because we're all just given a finite amount of time to uh, on this earth to enjoy it and to make something of it, and to invest a lot of time in the wrong person is just heartbreaking to me.
All right. Another question here. Jaden6214 from our Facebook group. Could you ask your guest what does he give a specific time that a couple should be together before considering marriage?
Um, there's generally not a specific time frame. I guess if I'm going to have a rule of thumb, I think within the first year, if your relationship is strong enough to last a year, then it's time to start considering marriage. Uh, but I firmly believe it takes about 2 years to really start to get to know somebody. You have to start experiencing life together. And I'm not referring living together, but I'm referring to going through different phases of life, different seasons. Someone might lose a job, because those are some big things. Life is going to throw a lot of different things at us. And but I think by the time you get to that 2 year period, if you've invested that much time, there should be the consideration of marriage, and or being in the planning stages of marriage, because statistically infatuation can last up to 2 years. But if you've developed your must-have and deal breaker list, and your must-have list are the non-negotiable characteristics or traits that you want in a partner. If your partner has all of your must-haves and none of your deal breakers, I think that's a good standard to set for dating anyone. But then you have to develop you have to make sure that you develop an intellectual, spiritual, emotional, and physical connection. And I'm not just talking, when I talk about physical, I'm not just talking about sex. I'm talking about, you have to be attracted to your partner. We want to have somebody that we're proud of. And women are men are very visual, and we want an attractive partner. Women are much more likely to give guys a break. How many times have you seen a not so attractive guy with a hot woman? It's they're much more likely to get to the personality and as opposed to just the outer looks. But they like looks too. So that's why it's important for all of us to take care of ourselves. So I'm kind of digressing there, but it probably by 2 years you should be pretty well sure that you're in a relationship that can be marriage quality. Because infatuation will have worn off by that time, and the blinders will be off. And again, using your must-have and your deal breaker list, you can cut through the infatuation, or step back from it at least temporarily, and say, well, does he have all of these things, or does she have any of my warning signs or deal breakers? And if they do, then it's time to say, you're a great person, but this is not the right relationship for me. And do that early. And then you're not wasting time. The must-have and deal breaker lists are what you use as your standard, or your boundaries for entry into a relationship. Then you have to develop all of these other things. There's a lot of moving parts to a relationship, and it does take time. And it just, like I said, life experiences come up. You have to spend time in doing life together before you really find out. You might find out, a couple of years down the road, that they have a terrible issue with, I don't know, some childhood triggers, but they just don't show up every day. So it takes a little bit of time.
All right. So I don't want Tracy Little to feel like we skipped over her question. Her question actually was, do you ever, in any instance, recommend living together to test the waters? And you said just a few minutes ago, somewhere in the midst of that amazing explanation you just gave, you said that you do not, you don't call for
Yeah,
that.
I do. Yeah, I do not. And I'll tell you what, my ex and I lived together for 8 years before we got married, and we were married for 17. So I was with her for 25 years, and the statistics bore fruit. The statistically, the science and studies bear out that if you live together prior to marriage, your odds of divorce are so much higher. While it's natural to think that, yeah, if we live together, we understand, what it's like to share space. We understand what it's like to dance in the kitchen, uh, and share duties around the house. But studies show just the opposite, that the relationship uh, doesn't develop in a way that bears out a hopefully a forever partner. So I tend to avoid making any recommendation of moving in together. It tends to hurt the relationship more than help.
Hmm. And it seems like after 8 years, she'd have figured out everything that was wrong with you.
Well, and that's part of the problem is, living together for 8 years, I overlooked a lot of stuff. I and with and again, that's part of why I got into what I do, because when I after my divorce, I was able to look back and say, yeah, within the first 30 days of dating my ex, when I can look back at it um, out of outside of being in that relationship, I could see red flags right from the beginning, but I ignored those. And most people do. 90% of people end up in marriages that are okay or mediocre at best. There's about only about 10% of marriages that are happy, healthy, strong, extraordinary relationships. So with that being said, my role is to try to help you recognize what a healthy relationship should look like, because most of us grew up in dysfunctional households, and mine was as dysfunctional as anybody's. And as we came close to, and my ex's family was dysfunctional too. But you don't know that at the time. It's not until I was 50 some years old that I recognized how dysfunctional my family was. And I'm not pointing my fingers at my ex. I have, I was 50% of that couple. So we the whole idea is to start making better choices up front, and staying out of, and this is going to tie into moving in together. The sad fact is that 80% of couples will be in bed on or before the eighth date. And studies also show that when you're intimate too soon, the relationship does not develop as strongly as it could. Because how many of you, and I'm raising my hand on this also, how many of you have slept with someone, first date, second date, early on in the relationship, only to wake up the next day and said, oh my gosh, what have I done? We have to do that walk of shame. And that's all part of it. When you start sleeping together, then the next step is to, well, we might as well just move in together, save some money. And I mean, we're having sex anyway, so why should I leave? And so it just, and when you introduce sex into that relationship that early, and especially for men, our brains shut down. We stop the learning process. We stop learning about our partner because it becomes a routine. We go to work, we come home, we have dinner, we watch TV, we go to bed, we have sex. I don't know if I can say that to you. Might have to edit that one out.
I got you,
for
boss. I got you.
Yeah. We become intimate.
This video is not recommended for children.
I know some of the I know some of the video sources. When you start talking about physical intimacy, they start ranking you or
I understand.
the algorithms drop you down. So anyway, the physical intimacy causes men and women too, but more so men. We can, as the clothes are coming off, all logic, all intelligence goes out the door. And again, it goes back to the fact that when you stop learning about each other, and that's part of it. When you're living together, you're physically intimate, and you stop learning about each other. You stop having the deep conversations. You stop, you stop discovering things about each other. You're in a routine, and your conversations are up here when they should be way down here, deep in the weeds, getting to know each other. So yeah, avoid early intimacy and avoid moving in before you're married.
That's right. The 70s and 80s caused a lot of that.
Oh,
Sex, drugs, and rock and roll back then.
Yep. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Yeah. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll were on steroids back then. All right. Looks like the last question. Technically, there's two questions. I'm not going to ask one of them because one of them's talking about the police getting involved. I'm not worried about that. All right. So, last question.
Yes, sir.
Let's see. Looks like Larry 2214 YouTube guy. Did you use your relationship and divorce as the blueprint for what you do daily?
Absolutely. I've got, people ask me, since I don't have, and I'm not bragging about this, but I don't carry a degree in sociology or psychology. And I often have people ask me, well, what qualifies you? Number one, I've been a student of self and relationship improvement for nearly 40 years now. I have, let's see, as of this coming birthday, I will have 52 years of personal experience in dating and relationships. And then 10 years of coaching, or 11 years of coaching on top of that. So there's a lot of practical knowledge there that comes. So it's. I'm sorry. What was the question?
The question was, do you use your relationship mishaps essentially in your divorce as the blueprint for what you do daily with couples?
Absolutely, because and one of the things that I did after my divorce was that I spent the next 2 or 3 years figuring out what went wrong, and I spent a full 2 years asking myself, could I have or what could I have done differently to make this relationship work? And it ultimately always circled back around to nothing, because there were some things that I could have done differently, but I don't think they would have caused my marriage to last. I could have continued to live in a mediocre marriage, and it would have been mediocre at best, because there were some communication issues that I couldn't control on my ex's side of the equation, and there was just nothing I could do about that. So my experiences, both personally and a lot of it does come from personal experience, because I don't want people to go through a divorce, even as amicable as my divorce was. I don't want people to go through that, and if I can help some people, especially in the the midlife singles, people over 40, those of us that have been married 20, 30, 40 years, to suddenly be back in the world of dating. Dating has changed so much in the last 20 years. William, when you think about it, when we started dating, we either had to ask the girl face to face, or we had to make a phone call, and that phone call was on a phone that was attached to the wall with a 3 or 6 or 8 foot cord. So everybody in the house, they got to hear that conversation, and those, for me at least, those were some of the most difficult conversations to have. In the dating rules back then, where typically you had to call the girl by Wednesday for a date on Friday or Saturday. You had to give her a couple of days. Several years ago, when I was doing some Uber driving for fun, I was driving a millennial around. He was a 30-something, and he was telling me, "Oh my gosh, to plan that far ahead." Said we text a girl now at 2 hours ahead of time. Said, bunch of us are going here. They group date. This stuff that we didn't do. So and then you have online dating. You have texting, and texting is probably one of the worst forms of communication. And then there's emails, but pick up a phone or meet in person. And so, from that aspect, dating has just changed so much, and it's, that's a whole nother rabbit hole.
What out of 100, 0 to 100, what percentage do you think the lack of interpersonal skills figures into relationship failures these days?
Oh, I think it. I'm not sure I can put a percentage on it, but it is very high. Some of the people that I talk to, and even some of my friends and acquaintances, over the years, I've interviewed a lot of people, and it's communication. You have to be able to talk about anything and everything. And guys generally are fairly. We're pretty bad at talking about anything emotional. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's because generally we're protecting our woman from some of the tougher sides of life. And women, on the other hand, they want to know all these details because they're used to talking to their girlfriends, and they're sharing all the tidbits of everything that's going on every day. Guys tend not to communicate that way. Because William, if you and I were sitting in a boat fishing, we're not going to be talking about, oh my gosh, my wife and I are just having so many problems. We're not going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about the fish not biting. We're going to be talking about the last football game. We're going to be talking about how badly the Chiefs have been playing this year. I'm a Chiefs fan.
I definitely would have enjoyed talking about that.
But so, I mean, those are the conversations where the men are going to have, and that's what I've found, though, that is when you are in an extraordinary relationship or a soulmate relationship, your communication does go much deeper. And part of the reason, and we're going to dive off into a little different direction here, is love languages. And I haven't mentioned love languages. If you haven't read the book, get the book. I'm recommending it to all of your audience. For those of you that haven't read it, it's a book written by Gary Chapman, and there's a married version, there's a singles version, there's a teen version, and it talks about how we communicate with each other in nonverbal ways. And just a thumbnail sketches. The five love languages are acts of service, physical touch, gifts, words of affirmation, and quality time. And I ran through those really quickly. And my top two are acts of service and physical touch. And my wife's was gifts. Gifts don't even register when I take the quiz for me. Gifts are not important in my life. And to her, they are. And that was part of our communication problem, is that as hard as I would try, I struggled to learn that language and to maintain speaking that language. And so when we're looking for that extraordinary relationship, one of the things we have to find out early on is, do they speak similar love languages to us? Because it makes it so much easier to communicate on a much, much, much deeper level. And and communication is such an important part of all relationships. It's even in our non-romantic relationships. We interact with people daily, whether it's at the grocery store, whether it's at work. We have to understand communication and how to talk to each other. And when we're talking about romantic relationships, if we're able to communicate on a deeper level, it just makes that relationship so much stronger. It doesn't mean every conversation is going to be, rainbows, butterflies, and unicorns. I don't want that to anybody to walk away with that thought. But it is going to be the communications are going to be much deeper, much more meaningful. And you may disagree, you may come away with some hurt feelings, or toes stepped on, or feathers ruffled, whatever you want to say, but you work through those things. And because your connection is so deep, so it almost, when you start talking about the connection in a soulmate relationship, and whether you call it soulmates or extraordinary relationship, I consider them the same. It's just, the connection is just so strong, so deep, that you work through those things because you each enhance each other's life. You're there to be supportive of your partner, and they're supportive of you. And it's just for me, it's a relationship that just defies words. But that's the relationship we should all be looking for. And I know there's going to be some people in your audience, crap, those relationships don't exist. They do. And the amazing thing, I mentioned my must-have list, and I know there's people out there, no, you can't do that. You've got to have serendipity and yada yada yada. All this other stuff has to. No, you have to know exactly what you want in your relationship. And what you'll find is, when you make your must-have list, when you find that extraordinary partner, and I have interviewed several hundred people that have said that they're in a soulmate or an extraordinary relationship. Each one has said almost the same thing verbatim, is that their partner has brought more to the table than they ever could have imagined. So, you develop your must-have list and your deal breaker list, and that keeps you focused on the things that you want. And then when you find that relationship, your communication will naturally become stronger and deeper. But along the way, you have to have the strength, the cojones, to be able to walk away from a good relationship in search of extraordinary. Because the worst thing you can do is end up in a ho-hum relationship, or an okay relationship, and miss your soulmate. And I believe we all have more than one soulmate. And I'm sorry for wandering off like this, but this is what I do.
Relationships, man. You're trying to fix relationships.
Well, I think we all deserve to be in that extraordinary relationship. And there are so many components that we just don't look at, and we don't realize. But through personal experience and study and coaching, I've discovered that when all of these things come together, it is downright magical. It's a godly relationship, and it's just a relationship that's beyond that. It's really hard to describe.
All right. First of all, can't thank you enough for being on today. You blasted through these questions that you had never seen before with eloquence and knowledge. Man, you just put some knowledge on us. So, is your book that you wrote nearly a decade ago now, or a decade ago, is it still in print?
It is. It's actually on Amazon. It's called Dating Backward: A Practical Guide to Dating and Finding Your Soulmate. And if you just Google it, if you type in dating backward or go into Amazon and type in dating backward, it'll pop right up at the top of the list. And it's available. It's not available in an Audible. That was at the time that Audible books, audio books were just coming into play. So it was never converted to an audiobook, but it's available in Kindle and paperback. So
Okay. It'll be easier to find it dating backwards than trying to put in Rick Soetebier, because you're not going to spell his name right anyway. So.
Exactly.
Rick, if somebody wants to reach out to you, either to follow you on social media to see what you got going on, or to actually reach out to you for your assistance, what's the easiest way for them to get in touch with you?
Well, you can reach me at Rick. If you want to email me, you can email me at rick@ricksoetebier.com, or go to ricksoetebier.com online and come to my website. There you'll find my online course. You'll find you can actually see my book there, and there's a link to Amazon right from my website. And also I do personal coaching, one-on-one. I've got several different levels of coaching. We can do an hour. My most popular package is a 6-hour package, and that runs about $400, and I think it's $405, but that's about a 10% discount. That's 6 hours of one-on-one coaching. Or I have an online course. If you want to do stuff on your own and may not need the in-depth coaching, the one-on-one stuff, because we really dive in depth, but we cover a lot of what I've covered in my course. There's about 3.5 hours of video and worksheets and quizzes that you go through before you progress into the next section. But it talks about getting mentally and emotionally prepared to date. It talks about we talk about there's 3 or 4 modules just on communication, and it's not just how to communicate, it's how to how to recognize some body language, but it also talks about some of the conversations to have with people. A lot of times we just have these high level conversations, but there are some important conversations like physical intimacy, like religion, politics, money. Some of these are very important conversations to have before we get into a long-term relationship. It's not conversations we necessarily need to have on the first date, but conversations we need to have nonetheless. And then it talks about being prepared to date. What do you need to do? Getting online, getting ready for the first date, those types of things. So anyway, the online course is a great value, and I'll make it an even better value. I'll give you the link to my introductory. When I launched my course a few weeks ago, I had it at 50% off. I'll give you that same discount. It's normally $497, so we do $257 for that, and roll from there.
All right, and I'll make sure for all our viewers, I'll make sure all that stuff is in the episode notes, especially Soetebier, because you won't spell it right. Yeah. So I'll make sure it's in there. Where you just click a link,
it's spelled just like it sounds.
Big man, there is no way. All right, so I remember 2 years ago before I first spoke to you, I practiced it for 2 days, make sure I got it right. So,
yeah,
right, I cannot thank you enough. I appreciate you taking an hour of your time. And like I said, guys, I hope what we talked about today has been not only inspirational, but it's going to be useful. It's a resource, and a lot of folks need this resource. So I can't thank you enough, my man.
Hey, my pleasure. I'm so glad to be here. And if any of you, if you have questions along the way, if anybody shoots you a question, feel free to shoot it on to me. So, and I'll make that offer too for your audience that if you can't find me, send your questions to William and he'll forward them on to me, and we'll make sure you get answers.
Sure, I sure will. Thank you, my man. I
Thank
hope
you,
you have a
William.
fantastic 2024, and I'll be in touch with you in the future, brother.
Sounds good. You too, brother.
All right, guys. And as we say here at What in the World, that's the end of another one. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And like I said, I